in reading the news, I just get angrier and angrier, and to the point where blood vessels in my forehead start to pop out, and I bleed from my eyes, and my nose flies away, and I just get really upset about stuff I see in the news. So I'm not going to tell you about any of the stuff that I'm upset about in the news because it's not really worth talking about because it's nonsense about political stuff that nobody should really care about. It's all this political stuff that's just eating away at our minds because it doesn't actually matter who's president and it doesn't actually matter who sits in Senate or in the House. It doesn't really matter, but people get all worked up about it, and that's what makes me mad. It's not who's in office that makes me mad. It's the fact that people care about who's in office that makes me mad, and I just get steaming mad, and I get in arguments on Twitter with people because of it. So we're not going to talk about who's in office because I really don't care, and I don't think anybody should because it doesn't really matter on a national level. Maybe it does on a state level, and it probably definitely does on a county and city level. Those things do matter because they can actually affect me. But when we're talking about on a national level, it really just doesn't matter. So I don't really see why people get so flared up about it. People just will get so fired up whenever you say, well, the president actually did do kind of a good thing the other day. They're like, what? He never does a good thing. How dare you? And if you say that, I really don't think that a Republican in the White House is going to make really any difference at all, and it'll probably make things worse than they are now, people just fly off the handle and tell you that you're probably a socialist. But I'm not. That's the weird thing, is I believe in less government than the Republicans do, so I don't really know how that makes me a socialist. But anyway, so an appeals court, it says that a man who fired a laser at a plane doesn't actually deserve a 30-month sentence, according to Ars Technica. Now, firing a laser at a plane has a lot of implications. It's not as innocent and childlike as it may seem, right? Like if I fire a laser at a plane, there's sort of an implication there that or there's consequences there that you wouldn't necessarily think of. So you think that when you fire say a green laser that you bought at a hobby store, and again, I'm not advocating the banning of green lasers that you can purchase at hobby stores. More people should own them. They're really fun, but there's certain usages for them, just as any tool, right? So I'm not saying that, green lasers should all be, you shouldn't be allowed to own a green laser. You need a license to own a green laser. Never would I ever advocate such a thing. And if I do advocate the implementation of a licensing system for much of anything, then that it's not really me and that a government agent has taken over. So if you hear me ever talking about government licensing, then it's not actually me. It's probably somebody from the CIA who's replaced me and sounds a lot like me. So you should come in and shoot that person. But anyway, so I'm not advocating at all by any means the requirements of licenses to own specific implements or the requiring of special permission to own a certain implement of any sort. I'm not advocating for that whatsoever. However, there's a proper usage for every tool. Just as I think you should be able to own a handgun or a fully automatic rifle, it's also a crime to shoot somebody with one of those implements. Now, these implements can be very fun and can be used for a lot of good purposes, sporting purposes, home defense purposes, hunting purposes, just having fun plinking purposes. All of these things are well and good and are very much ingrained into our culture, and that's a very positive thing. A lot of people disagree, but I think that's a very positive thing that we are able to use these implements in a responsible manner. And most people who are responsible gun owners don't actually cause any harm in of themselves, are probably actually safer than a lot of other people. But just as it's wrong to shoot at somebody with a gun, although it's the ownership of said gun is not necessarily wrong, and it definitely is not wrong, same goes for a laser pointer, where if I shine a laser pointer in your eyes and cause macular degeneration somehow, then that's wrong. But the pure ownership of that implement, that tool, is not wrong. There's no moral implication with my owning a green laser. However, there is an implication morally with me shining it into your eyes and potentially blinding you. Well, somebody has received a 30-month sentence for shining a green laser into an aircraft, and that's where the problems start to arise. You have to remember, now, I'm not a pilot by any means. I know a few people who are. I think I know about 2 people who are pilots. I definitely know one. And the other one is a friend of my dad's who I sometimes hang out with. And he actually, for my birthday, let me fly in his plane. So I definitely know 2 two different pilots. So I have a tad bit of experience with planes. I'm by no means an expert, and if I ever got into an airplane, I have no idea how to get the thing off the ground. But I can tell you this, just from observation. Flying an airplane requires quite a bit of concentration, just as driving a car does. Now, the cool thing about flying a plane is that you're usually not in a whole lot of danger of veering off and crashing into something, usually. That's not necessarily the case with a car, but really the same thing can be applied. Now, there's a lot of things that have to be kept in mind. It's not like an airplane is just super easy to fly, right? Like there's a lot of navigational things you have to keep in mind. There's compasses, there's a lot of mental acrobatics that has to be employed in order to fly an airplane. And people who can fly airplanes are probably much smarter than I am, much more coordinated than I am, because I don't think I could do that. Driving a car, on the other hand, any idiot can do it, and most idiots do it. So it's not too much of a difficult thing to drive a car. However, most of us have driven a car, so I can use this as a example. Imagine you're driving in your car down the street, and you're suddenly blinded. Well, that's kind of a problem for you because you need to see to drive. At least I hope you need to see to drive. I hope you see when you're driving. But most of us need to see to drive. So if you have a laser shining in your eyes and you're suddenly blinded, you probably can't drive very well. Well, same goes for somebody who's flying an airplane. So that having been said, a 30-month sentence seems entirely appropriate for somebody who's shown a laser into a cockpit of an airplane or any sort of aircraft, because quite a lot of damage could have been done by that action. And it's not a preventative thing where it's like this thing should be criminal because this could have happened. It's that this should be criminal because it's a miracle this didn't happen. It would be, I think, comparable to firing a gun into a crowded room and the bullet hit nobody. It's amazing, but you should definitely be thrown in jail at the very least for reckless endangerment. Well, a federal appeals court says that a California high school student's 30-month prison sentence for firing a laser pointer at a small aircraft is actually too extreme. The Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled on Thursday that Adam Gardenhire should get no more than 10 months confinement after pleading guilty to pointing the laser at a small aircraft as it approached the Burbank Airport near Los Angeles in 2012. The issue here is whether Gardenhire's actions were reckless. Well, it seems that just going by the societal definition of what reckless is, then we can pretty well say that firing a laser pointer into the cockpit of a small aircraft is pretty reckless. Well, as the court wrote in its 18-page opinion, the district court's finding that Gardenhire was aware of the risks created by his conduct lastly rests on the fact that Gardenhire's high school friend who lent him the laser told him not to shine the laser at anyone's eyes because it would blind people. But knowing that a laser beam can cause blindness when pointed directly at a person's eyes is very different than knowing that a laser beam can be distracting to pilots who are both enclosed in a cockpit and at least 2,640 feet away. Nor did the government submit any evidence of what even an average person would know about the effects of aiming a laser beam at an aircraft. So now I guess the question needs to be asked is, did the person intentionally fire a laser beam at an airplane, or was he just pointing it up in the sky and thinking that he wasn't going to do any harm by doing so? That's a rather foolish assumption, but you can understand that assumption, right? Like you can see, well, okay, the kid didn't actually mean to do any harm, and in the end, nobody was actually hurt by it, so maybe he shouldn't get a prison sentence. So that's sort of where the question lies now. Hot News Talk Radio, you're on the air. What's going on?
Can I speak from the perspective of a private pilot?
I wish you would. Please do.
Okay. By the way, you probably could learn how to fly an airplane.
Oh, okay.
Land one, it just takes practice. If you can drive a car, you could fly an airplane. It's I'm going to say it's not that hard. Yeah, to get your to pass your test, it is somewhat difficult. There's a lot you have to remember, like when you pass your driving test. But once you get up there and learn how to fly, as long as you avoid Atlanta and Orlando and some of the bigger airports, it's not all that difficult. However, I have been in situations flying at night where all you see is a black hole. And a lot of times you have to click your radio 5 times to turn the lights on your runway to land. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. However, to have a light shining in your cockpit while you're attempting to do this, to me, it almost amounts to attempted murder. because it's you don't know how dangerous it is until you're in that situation where everything is black and you could see nothing under you but some lights, and then you're guessing whether are they street lights or are they the runway lights because they're so close to each other. However, there should be in place in the statute the penalty that needs to be applied to this individual or individuals because of the act. And this is where judges and California judges are out of control. It's not their job to say this is too extreme or this is not extreme. Let's present the facts. If the facts show that this individual is guilty of this crime statutorily, the statute should then dictate how much time they get in prison. I would, instead of having him go to prison, I think we need to bring back the whipping post. And they had that in Delaware up to about 30 years ago.
Really?
Where you bring this guy onto a post and you get volunteer private pilots to whip him. Give him 200 lashes. Beat his ass.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that he, let's assume that he had no idea that this would cause any harm. Do you think that that maybe he should get a lighter sentence because of that?
No, I think he should be in a mental institution.
I would actually agree with that.
There's something called common sense. If he doesn't realize that flashing a laser beam into a cockpit is dangerous, he's not mentally capable of even standing trial. So maybe they should shoot him up with some lithium.
The story, though, interestingly enough, points out that he may not have actually intentionally shown it into a cockpit. It could have been pure coincidence that the happenstance was that he fired it up in the air and it somehow ended up in a guy's cockpit. So he may have thought that he wasn't.
That could be because a lot of times you can't see these little planes, especially at night.
Sure.
So if the facts are presented that there was no intent to shine it into the cockpit or the airplane, then there's no crime.
Right.
But part of what they would have to prove at trial is intent. They have to prove that he intentionally aimed the laser into the cockpit.
Yeah.
Now, because we've all had lasers and we shine them up and we shine them in trees and shine them on birds, and so on and so forth. But no, if there was no intent, there's no crime. If he did it accidentally.
Right. He could have been stargazing, because I've been with stargazing groups where they'll use laser pointers to say, okay, this is Orion, that sort of thing.
So we're presuming here, and I believe what you talked about is it was proven that he intentionally shot the laser into the cockpit, not knowing the harm it could cause. Correct?
Correct. Yeah, and it doesn't really matter anyway because he pled guilty to it. So it's kind of
yeah. I mean, come on. Like if a car's driving down the expressway and you're standing there on top of a bridge shooting a laser into the windshield, come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, it's pretty well clear at that point. Well, thanks for your call.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah, some added perspective from a private pilot. Yeah, it's interesting though, because a lot of these cases you do have to sort of look at it with a critical eye. Now, we can assume because he pled guilty, we'll just make this assumption that he knew the implications of firing a laser beam up into the air. But something that probably should be pointed out is that you really do have to be careful with a laser pointer for somebody who may not know that this could cause problems, because accidents do happen. And, really bad things can happen purely by somebody not knowing what could happen. So you have to keep in mind that, especially in our area where there are a lot of planes flying around, I mean, most of us live right next to the airport here. If you're in Chattanooga, you're near an airport. If even where I am in Georgia, I live in Ringgold and I'm near an airport, right? Like the Chattanooga airport is a pretty major airport. It's an international airport. So you're going to be having a lot of planes flying around. So if you are going to be stargazing, more power to you, but please, please, please make sure that there are no airplanes nearby. Now, an airplane can generally be located by the flashing lights, so just make sure. But, I would not feel safe using a green laser pointer shining it up into the sky on my property, because all the time I see planes flying back and forth. And I know they're going to the airport in Chattanooga or to the airport in Atlanta, either way, or back and forth. So you have to be very, very careful when using a green laser beam. Now, if you're using it in a manner of, not pointing it up in the sky and just lighting matches with the thing and having fun, hey, cool. More power to you. Again, that's awesome. But you got to be very, very, very careful when you're pointing much of anything up into the sky, because piloting is a very, very serious thing. And just as driving is. So just as you don't want people to be distracted while driving, you definitely don't want people to be distracted while flying, especially if this distraction could potentially blind them. So learn from this man's mistakes, this young boy's mistake. I think he's in high school. Learn from his mistakes, and please don't do that. So there's your solution. Now, Something that's interesting, though, something that I wonder if we're going to have to face in the future is we're seeing a lot of drones being used for delivery purposes, and actually, we're going to get into that. But we're seeing a lot of drones being used for delivery purposes all around everywhere, especially nowadays where we're really pushing that. A lot of different companies are pushing that. Amazon, Facebook has been using drones for delivery of internet, actually, and we're going to talk about that too. I'm teasing you. And Microsoft has been doing research into drones. Boston Dynamics, of course, which is owned by Google, has been doing research into drones, and in fact land drones, as in bipedal robot Terminator drones, which are very, very cool. Lots of different companies are doing research into drones. So I wonder if there will be a criminal offense for shining a laser pointer at a drone, because maybe it could possibly harm the navigational system. So there would have to be a whole new system of laws in place, perhaps, or maybe it would just fall under the old law of destruction of property. Because I'm noticing this a lot, where they're wanting to make a whole bunch of laws that are really just reiterations of old ones, where instead of it just being a destruction of property charge, it's instead a willful destruction of drone charge or something along those lines, which carries a heftier fine or a longer jail sentence. And that just seems a little bit silly to me, where we're having all these different fines and all these different little things for what's really exactly the same as another crime. And it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. So I just looked up what the definition of common sense is. And according to our buddies over at Google, it is good sense and sound judgment in practical matters. So it's interesting because that's actually a little bit of a subjective thing. So common sense is kind of interestingly enough, a subjective thing. Now, there's also the book by Tom Paine, Common Sense, which, according to Google again, was written on January the 10th, 1776. It's actually a pretty good book. Go ahead and read it. But the definition of common sense is good sense and sound judgment, interestingly enough, or according to dictionary.com, sound practical judgment that is independent of specialized knowledge, training, or the like, normal native intelligence. So something which may be common sense to one area is not common sense to another area. So it's kind of weird how common sense works. Maybe perhaps common sense is not a universal thing, because you would say that it's common sense to do one thing here, but doing the exact same option in a different geographical location would be exactly the wrong thing to do. So common sense is definitely common sense, in that you have to use common sense in order to use common sense. Kind of weird how that works out. Well, in other words, or pardon me, not in other words, but the government has said that they have not proven that Mr. Gardenhire, the person who's shown a laser beam up into the air, knew that firing a laser at an airplane from the ground was dangerous, which I would say is not common sense, meaning that the government did not demonstrate his actions were reckless. Therefore, he did not deserve the harsher sentence, the San Francisco-based appeals court wrote. No resentencing date has been set yet. So for the man who fired a laser at a plane, the government and the appeals court has said that he does not deserve the 30-month sentence. So we'll just see how that goes. And as soon as we find out about somebody else firing a laser at a plane, we'll let you know here on Hot News Talk Radio. And this is Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. This is the radio station where we carry a lot of thought-provoking programs, because we don't just want you to listen to what we rattle off. I want you to think. Now, a lot of people don't want you to think, because they want you to just listen to what they say and assume that they are correct. And I don't want that. I want you to fact check everything I say. Fact check everything I say, because I could be wrong, right? No, not because I could be wrong. I am always right. But it's a healthy thing to always fact check something. Like, I will know for a fact that somebody's correct about something, but I'll look it up anyway, just because I should. You should look up things, because who knows? It's just one of those things. Well, this is Hot News Talk Radio. You can listen to us on the website on hotnewstalkradio.com. If you get the TuneIn app, then you can search for us on TuneIn. It's Hot News Talk Radio on TuneIn, and you can listen to us streaming live to your smartphone. Very high quality feed. It sounds great. I do it in my car all the time with my data plan, which is now run out because I listen to it all the time. So this is Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. Don't forget to listen to Nuganomics.com with David Toulis, which is coming up in about 30 minutes, right here on Hot News Talk Radio. That's AM 1240.
This is a mob mode. This is a mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am?
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway, near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. Supercharged.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducts. Call now.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Toulis, weekdays 1 to 3.
Host News Talk 1240.
Love your neighbor, buy local.
News Talk 1240.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next?
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. An investigation in Garland, Texas continues after a shooting outside a contest for cartoon depictions of the Prophet Muhammad.
Garland police say the two unnamed suspects pulled into the event parking lot, shooting at an unarmed security guard. He received minor injuries. Police returned fire, killing both suspects.
Fox's Casey Stigl. Fox News confirms the FBI has ID'd one of the suspects and is looking into his possible ties to a terrorist group. Another Republican jumping into the race for the White House.
I'm Ben Carson, and I'm a candidate for President of the United States.
Carson, a retired neurosurgeon at a rally in Detroit. Earlier today, Carly Fiorina, former CEO of Hewlett Packard, says she's running. They joined GOP Senators Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and Marco Rubio, who are seeking the top spot on the GOP ticket. And the Milwaukee Brewers have fired manager Ron Renicky, replacing him with former infielder Craig Counsell. Fox News, we report, you decide.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
I've been getting in arguments on Twitter a lot. I'm not sure why, but I keep getting in arguments on Twitter. No, I do know why. It's because I like to rile people up. But I keep getting in arguments on Twitter with people who don't seem to understand how economics work or how governmental systems work. So it's a lot of fun to sort of rattle their chain and maybe provoke a little bit of thought, where I'll start off with a very evocative and very provocative and very sort of poking with a stick sort of phrase. Okay, so what happens is I'll go on Drudge Report's Twitter and I'll click on who's been replying to the tweets. And I'll see people who are, just very blatant neocons. They don't understand how politics work, and they don't understand how economy works, and they really don't understand how a lot of things work, but they like to assume that they do because they're old and they voted Republican. So they definitely know how things work. Well, they don't. But it's my duty as an informer to the public to tell them how they are wrong. So on Twitter, I will tweet at these people and inform them just how wrong they are. Now, it makes people mad, and it evokes a rather inflammatory response, which is oftentimes very funny because they don't really know how to counter any arguments because they really only know how to regurgitate things that they've heard on talk radio. So hopefully, you who listen to my show will know how to regurgitate the things that I say on talk radio so you can counter people who regurgitate other things that they hear on talk radio. So this is a very sort of it's a back and forth sort of thing. So what was happening on Twitter was people were arguing about the protests, the riots, which have been occurring over in Baltimore. Now, obviously, I'm not a supporter of looting. This harms businesses. This harms small businesses, which I'm a very, as you, I'm sure you know, a very big advocate for small businesses. As is our friend here on Hot News Talk Radio, David Toulis. He and I are both very big advocates of small businesses. We prefer them actually over big businesses. Not that a big business is necessarily a bad or wrong or immoral thing, but small businesses tend to be local. And I like the local economy much more than I like the national economy. Not to say that I'm not a national economy player. Heaven forbid that I would ever say that because I do buy things on Amazon. But I try to buy local as much as I can, locally as much as I can. So the argument on Twitter that I got into was about police. Now, police are a very touchy subject. If you want to say anything bad about police, people will immediately put on their American flag T-shirt, and they'll put on "Born in the USA" by Bruce Springsteen, and they will yell at you on Twitter. So if you ever bring up the idea of maybe police agencies and police departments aren't necessarily such a great thing, people will just jump down your throat and tell you that you're a communist or that you're a socialist or that you're not a Republican, which two of those one of those things is true, two of them are not. It's true I am not a Republican, but it's definitely not true that I'm a communist. It's certainly not true that I'm a socialist. So I refute those points, sir. However, the argument that I got into on Twitter, and I will get to it eventually, was that this person was saying that the police need to just start shooting people. Well, there's arguments for that. There's some arguments for that, but I said, just sort of to rile them up, well, you know, police are a tyrannical entity. You can't say that. So he got all mad and he said, you're probably, these are his exact words, you're probably a person eating Doritos in your mom's basement. Well, I don't like Doritos, and my parents don't have a basement. So I refute that point, sir. But no, to which I responded, and you are somebody who can't form a proper argument to refute my claims. So then he goes into how I say how the government which we have, the state which we have, is based on the forcible taking of money. It est a theft. Thus, this point is moot. So really, it definitely can be argued that the police are a tyrannical entity because they are reliant on the theft of your money to keep them sustained. So he was very upset about that, and so he said, "Well, I am an advocate for small government. However, taxes taken by confiscation are a necessary evil." So even people who are arguments, or not our arguments, they themselves are the arguments. The people who are advocates for small government will still advocate for the forcible taking of your money. That's a very strange concept. So it just goes to show you that even the people who claim to want to fix the system and claim to want to give us smaller government don't actually know the solution to the problem, because the solution to the problem obviously is just destruction of the whole system, or a allowance for the controlled demolition of the whole system, which is already occurring. You know, the system is already falling apart. What system am I talking about? Am I talking about capitalism? No, I'm talking about controlled capitalism. I'm talking about state-sponsored capitalism, which of course can't possibly work. The state should sponsor no system whatsoever. The state should have nothing at all to say about much of anything, actually. The state probably shouldn't say anything at all, because anytime the state says something, something horrible happens immediately afterwards. So the state should really just stay out of everything, including foreign affairs, especially foreign affairs, including business, in fact, especially business. So these things are all things which the government should really just have nothing at all to say about any of these particular topics. However, people who claim to know a fix for the problem, which is big government, don't actually know what the solution is to big government. So they can say all day that they have bold solutions, perhaps, but they couldn't possibly because they don't know what the problem is in the first place. How can you have a fix for something if you don't know what the problem is? Of course, the problem is the state, but these people will advocate for the state, so they don't know what the solution is because they're advocates for the problem. This is a very big problem, that we have people who claim to be advocates for the solution of the problem, even though they don't actually know what the problem is, and in fact, advocates for that problem. Because all day they will talk about patriotism, they'll talk about national security, they'll talk about how we need to support the police and all these different things, when really that's just making the problem worse. It's not really going to help anything at all. Now, I'm not saying that we should immediately go out and yell at cops and be mean to people and be mean-spirited and unchristian in our behavior towards the police. No, not at all. These people, I'm sure, are very nice people, and I'm sure that they would be very pleasant to have a beer with if I could legally do that. But unfortunately, the problem is that they don't seem to understand the moral implication of what they are doing. Either they don't understand or they simply don't care about the moral implication of what they're doing, which is they're acting as agents for an immoral entity, which is the state. Whether they're doing it knowingly or not, they are doing it. And the Nuremberg argument will not work here, because an international court has already said that you cannot say that you were just following orders and use that as a legitimate excuse for all the wrongs you've been committing. So that's my stance on the state and on the police. The police themselves, I'm sure, are very nice people. I'm sure a lot of police officers are very kind and very gentle people. However, they work for an immoral entity, so I can't possibly be advocates for their particular agency. Well, the Department of Justice is another agency that I really can't be an advocate for, and they are going to be reviewing how they are deploying, or how it is deploying, I should say. The Justice Department itself is going to review how it deploys cell phone snooping technology. So an ACLU, a worker for the ACLU, I should say, has said that federal oversight of when and why stingrays are used is long overdue. Well, I can't really disagree with that. So a stingray, of course, is also known as a cell site simulator. It's a device which is used to spy on your cell phones. Cell site simulator can capture your locational information, i.e. your GPS location, or using triangulation, it can capture your location, which is cell tower triangulation. It can also capture your short message service messages, i.e. text messages, and it can take in your voice calls. So really anything at all you do on your phone can be captured by a cell site simulator. And actually some models can capture your 4G LTE data, so your mobile data. So if you're browsing some of those anarchist sites on the web, the FBI will know about it if they have a cell site simulator nearby. Well, the Department of Justice, the DOJ, is going to pull back the curtain and conduct a formal review of how, when, and why it uses mobile phone surveillance devices, commonly known as stingrays, according to a report Sunday evening from the Wall Street Journal. However, the Department of Justice has yet to determine exactly when and how this will occur. Now, because I'm a very cynical person, there are two things that really come to mind when this occurs, when they're saying that they're going to be pulling back the curtain. Number one, they're probably going to lie. Number two, that means stingrays are probably an antiquated system and they have something better already, so they're fully willing to talk about the old antiquated system, because I'm a very, very cynical person. Devlin Barrett, a Wall Street Journal reporter who broke the story, tweeted that the internal review began before Attorney General Eric Holder left office. According to that story, an unnamed DOJ spokesperson said that the agency is, quote, examining its policies to ensure that they reflect the department's continuing commitment to conducting its vital missions while according appropriate respect for privacy and civil liberties, end quote. So the Department of Justice says we are going to trample on your rights. However, we're going to be very respectful in how we do so. So we're going to totally ignore your First Amendment right to free speech. We're going to totally ignore your Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable searches and seizures, and your Fifth Amendment commitment or protection against self-incrimination. We're going to just totally ignore all of those things and cease to recognize them for the purposes of national security, so that we can blow up people you have no qualms with. And we're going to claim that we are doing it in a very respectful manner. So Patrick Rodenbush is a spokesperson with the DOJ, and he also emailed Ars Technica with the exact same statement as well. So the Department of Justice seems to be copy-pasting the same phrase and then emailing it out to a bunch of different agencies. So not only can stingrays or cell site simulators be used to determine location by spoofing a cell tower, they can also be used to intercept calls and text messages. Once one has been deployed, the devices intercept data from a target phone as well as information from other innocent phones within the vicinity. For years, federal and local law enforcement have tried to keep their existence a secret while simultaneously upgrading their capabilities. Now, I do not know if these are used in Chattanooga. As a non-Tennessean, I am a resident of Georgia, a permanent resident of Georgia. Hopefully permanent anyway. I kind of like the state. I don't have the ability to sign or send off a Freedom of Information Act request with the state, but I do know that cell site simulators are being used in Georgia around the Georgia Tech campus. So they do use them. In fact, Georgia Tech's police force uses cell site simulators on campus. So if you are a Georgia Tech student, perhaps you're just now listening to us here on vacation, you should know that your cell phone is actually legitimately being spied on. So less than a week ago, in fact, a robbery suspect in St. Louis who had previously pleaded guilty changed her plea after discovering that a Stingray was used in her case. The prosecutors next dropped the charges, and the attorneys continue to insist that this change of heart had nothing to do with the snooping technology. Typically, police deploy Stingrays without first obtaining a search warrant. So in January of 2015, the FBI asserted that it does not need a warrant to use them in public, because in public you have no reasonable expectation of privacy. However, the rebuttal would be that a use of a phone is expected to be in private. If I'm on a cell phone, I expect that conversation to be private. Even though there are people around, I don't expect people to be listening into my phone call, because people tend to not. So if I'm on a private conversation, I don't expect that private conversation to be listened into, especially since one half of it can't be heard by people who are bystanders. So the FBI's point is really moot, and the FBI is simply using an excuse in order to get what they want. So if law enforcement seeks judicial approval at all, it's usually under a pen register and trap and trace application. This requires the authorities to show relevance to a criminal investigation rather than prove the probable causes necessary for a warrant. Judges who sign off on these agreements have been typically unaware of the Stingray's full capabilities. So we have judges who don't actually know what Stingray does signing off on Stingray. So imagine if I signed off on a war, not knowing that it was a war. You told me instead that it was a covert operation in order to kill a bunch of people for political means. And I said, oh, okay, whatever. I don't know what that means, but I'll sign it. So that's exactly what these judges do, is they don't actually know what the heck a Stingray device does. I mean, not many people do anyway. So he just signs off on it and says, well, the police wouldn't lie to me. The veil of secrecy surrounding these devices has lifted ever so slightly over the last year. Similar to the St. Louis incident, there has been a small handful of known criminal cases nationwide where charges have been impacted or even dropped because the defendants challenged the use of Stingrays. Cops even lied to courts about their use, and this is not something that is very non-apparent, I guess would be the word, because cops will often lie to courts, and you'd think that they would be very obvious about how they're lying to the courts, but they are not. This is Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. You can listen to us on the website on hotnewstalkradio.com, and you can also listen to us on the website, or you already did that, on hotnewstalkradio.com. You can listen to us on the TuneIn app. Just go to the TuneIn app and search for 1240 WSTT or Hot News Talk Radio, and you can listen to us on the web that way. And if you go on Twitter, just search for Hot News Talk Radio on Twitter, and you can see all of our tweets on Twitter. So there's a lot of different ways to listen to us. There's a lot of different ways to keep us constantly in earshot. So go to hotnewstalkradio.com. You can always tune in on Hot News Talk Radio on 1240 on your AM dial, and you can get the TuneIn app and then search for Hot News Talk Radio and listen to us on your smartphone anywhere in the world. So cops have actually lied to courts about the usage of Stingrays. These results stem from the FBI's non-disclosure agreement with various law enforcement agencies nationwide, and the agreements have only recently been published in full and unredacted form. This means that this has a pretty big implication behind it, which is that these police officers, police agencies value the feds more than they value disclosure, which is interesting. The police, it seems, will value their fellow brothers in law enforcement, their fellow brothers in the police unions, than they value the public knowledge, which is very indicative of a rather tyrannical system, but we already knew that, right? Civil liberties advocates lauded the Department of Justice's move and look forward to more details being revealed. The ACLU attorney Nathan Wessler told Ars Technica that a shift towards transparency and using warrants is long overdue, but the slow pace of that transition is pretty troubling. He says, it's disturbing that the FBI has been gagging local police from telling judges and defense attorneys about Stingray use, yet doing nothing to ensure that local law enforcement uses this technology in accord with the Fourth Amendment. Because frankly, the people in the FBI do not care about the Fourth Amendment. But, I mean, we already knew that, right? It's not really a big surprise that they don't care about the Fourth Amendment. I mean, it's just common sense, really, that the FBI wouldn't care about the Fourth Amendment. It's just something that we all kind of know. Like, if I did a random man on the street interview and I said, do you think the FBI cares about the Constitution? Probably a lot of people would say, no, I don't think the FBI really cares about the Constitution. So it just seems really obvious at this point that these different agencies really just don't care about the Constitution or about law. They care about the bottom line, which is serving whoever they're going to serve, be it some director in their agency or some cause which they think is going to be helping the American people or giving money to contractors, whatever. They don't really care. But that's something that I just assumed everybody would know, right? Like, that's just a pretty good assumption that that police and the FBI don't really care about the law. Well, former public defender and current Electronic Frontier Foundation staff attorney Hani Fakouri also applauded the move that the DOJ is making, noting that all the secrecy hurt public safety in concrete ways through dismissed cases. The fact the federal government wasn't providing any real oversight or guidance on how to use these devices, coupled with the non-disclosure agreement, meant local departments were out figuring it out on their own. He told Ars Technica via email, "You've seen the backlash as local communities learn about the existence of these devices," he says. "I just hope there's more than an internal conversation and investigation, but meaningful change, including the use of a warrant nationwide before deploying these devices, as well as significantly improved transparency and accountability." So it's really just it's just appalling that this keeps going on, where we keep having this problem where these different agencies who are supposed to be employed by the people just totally ignore their employers. Can you imagine if I just totally ignored everything that the people here at the station wanted me to do? That would be a horrible thing. If I just started cursing and swearing and saying how I sure do hate personal liberties here on the station, I would probably get booted out the door very quickly. So it's basically exactly the same thing that these different agencies are doing, where they just say, I really don't care about the people who we're employed by. We're just going to do what we do because it's just what we think is right. We determine that this is the proper way to continue status quo, so we're just going to keep it going there. We're just going to keep it going, man. We're just going to keep doing what we're going to do. Well, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can listen to us on Hot News Talk Radio. You can go to AM 1240 on your radio dial and listen to us there. Check out the all-new Hot News Talk Radio website on hotnewstalkradio.com, featuring our links to useful websites. You can go to hotnewstalkradio.com. That is hotnewstalkradio.com. So it's the new and improved hotnewstalkradio.com. And you can also get the TuneIn app, download the TuneIn app, and then search for Hot News Talk Radio on your smartphone, and you'll be able to listen to us streaming live to your smartphone. On the TuneIn app, just search for Hot News Talk Radio. It's a great way to listen to us as well. You can even listen to us out in space because there's residual Wi-Fi that actually makes it out into space, believe it or not. New York Civil Liberties Union attorney Marcio Hirose led the charge recently to force the Erie County Sheriff's Department in New York State to disclose Stingray documents. She hopes the Department of Justice's move to revisit their stance on stingrays and warrants can trickle down to those local law enforcement agencies also currently deploying stingrays. Worth noting is that now that we know about stingrays, probably the different agencies are going to be moving to a newer and better and probably more expensive offering from the Harris Corporation that's going to spy on us in an even more covert way. Probably what happened was, this is just my explanation, I totally lost my word. Don't you hate it when that happens? You feel like you got smacked on the head with a baseball bat and all the words that were in your head fly out through your eyeballs and you can't think of anything anymore? Probably some person in an agency higher up in the Department of Justice or the Department of Homeland Security realized that Ars Technica and different news agencies and possibly even Hot News Talk Radio was talking about Stingray devices and talking about what a threat they are to our personal liberties. So he immediately phoned up the Harris Corporation and said, we need a better way to spy on people immediately. So the Harris Corporation said, okay, we got this new product out. It's going to cost you $4 million per unit. We'll send it out to you as soon as we can. They say, great, we'll pay $5 million for it. So they get all these different devices, $5 million a piece. We want 500 of them. And they send out all these different devices. And now that they have this new way of spying on us that we probably won't find out about for another 5 years, they call up different news agencies and say, look, we're wanting to do full disclosure. We're going to be transparent about our usage of Stingrays because there's a new and better system that we have that you're never going to find out about, at least until somebody finds out about it, because some tyrant, some awful turncoat has leaked information about these particular devices which we use to spy on you. So that's the goings-on. That's your update on the goings-on in the State Department, where they're always working to oppress you. Congratulations, you pay for it as well. So this is Hot News Talk Radio. We have a lot of great programming here on Hot News Talk Radio. We have Imus in the morning. We have Laura Ingram. On Tuesdays, we have Real Estate University, which is a show I'm very happy to help to produce, where they talk about real estate and real estate investing here in our local area. There's Nuganomics.com with David Toulis, which is coming up in just a little bit here on Hot News Talk Radio. The show where the very esteemed David Toulis talks about local economy and free markets and the different local issues as they affect us here in our local area and in our local economy here on Hot News Talk Radio. So Facebook's free internet for the poor is leaving out high bandwidth sites. Now, that's not something that's particularly surprising. It's Facebook's internet.org, which is aiming to give impoverished people around the world free, that's in very big air quotes, free mobile access to a selection of internet services. And it's opening the platform to developers after facing criticism that the program's restrictions violate net neutrality principles. Who cares if they do, really? The partnership with mobile operators gives free access to a few dozen websites, of course, including Facebook, through a mobile app that's available in parts of Africa, Latin America, and Asia. Although the app is ad-free and companies don't pay to be part of it, several companies in India pulled out of internet.org because it steers users towards a limited set of services. So, of course, this is totally voluntary, and these people absolutely have the right to pull out of internet.org if they so choose. But it's interesting that they're already complaining about net neutrality, even though this is taking place in regions which are not governed by net neutrality, because net neutrality can really only be enforced within our very large borders here within the United States. Very, very strange. Hot News Talk Radio.
This is a mob mode. This is a mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You do not have to be living with constant pain. You need to make the choice today to enjoy a revitalized body. You deserve to live a better pain-free life. And Dr. Ross can help. At Ross Chiropractic, failure is not an option. For over 40 years, Dr. Ross, a graduate of the prestigious Palmer College of Chiropractic, prided himself